My name's Jason Schuster. I'm a doctor of physical therapy. I own Intricate Art Spine and Body Solutions. It's a continuing education company teaching other doctors how to do a couple things. Before that, I was a fly fishing guide in Patagonia, Chile, and southwestern Alaska for a decade. This is a clip from our online dry needling 2 class, Dry Needling to Improve Men's and Women's Pelvic Health. This is a great class. Check it out on our website, intricateartseminars.com, to get the full 10 CEU fully online class. Dry needling to treat erectile dysfunction and pain with sex. Dry needling is the best treatment without question that physical therapists, athletic trainers, other people like that, other medical practitioners like that have at their disposal to fix erectile dysfunction. And without question, it's one of the best, if not the best treatment in all of medicine to fix erectile dysfunction. All of the pharmaceutical drugs, you guys, all the most commonly spoken about ones, Viagra, Cialis, they work on nitrous oxide pathways, which improves blood flow. One of the most objective things we know about dry needling is dry needling also improves blood flow. So dry needling is one of the best ways to improve and fix erectile dysfunction. We're going to go over all the muscles that are typically primarily involved. We're going to go over why just treating those muscles is a big mistake and why it's important to regulate the autonomic nervous system to resolve erectile dysfunction, just like it's important to regulate the autonomic nervous system to resolve any other impairment. So let's go over the muscles first, and then we'll go over some specifics about how erection happens, how you maintain an erection, why it's a problem for such a huge percentage of guys, and we're going to go over how to fix it and all that good stuff. As far as the literature goes, you guys, if you just read the dry needling literature on erectile dysfunction, you would come away thinking that there was only 2 muscles involved, really, the bulbospongiosus and the ischiocavernosus. And that's a very, very simple way to think about it. Those are the 2 closest muscles to the penis. It seems pretty cheap that the literature is just looking at the 2 muscles that are closest to the problem and then assuming that those muscles are like a big primary cause of the problem. The muscles themselves are not the problem. The muscles are dysfunctioning for the same reason that you're having erectile problems. It's the sympathetic autonomic nervous system is too chronically hyperactive. So the bulbospongiosus and the ischiocavernosus, you guys, like I mentioned, 2 closest muscles to the penis. The bulbospongiosus is the center one there, and the ischiocavernosus is the one on the ischium/rim of the pubis there. So those muscles really blend with the base of the penis and with the rest of the pelvic floor, and those muscles are, without question, they have a big role that they play in maintaining and getting an erection. However, the muscles themselves are not the problem. It's the nervous system that's the problem, that's inhibiting the muscles from working normally. Right? We'll keep going through the muscles, and then we'll talk about actually more of kind of the neurophysiology of what's going on and how to fix it. So next group of muscles, here's the same 2 muscles, just a different view, you guys. So one of the ways that I think thinking about muscles is good, and a better way to think about muscles than I think how most people think about muscles, and this is, I also think about it this way, and I try to encourage people to think about it more this way because it helps with an overall thought process that's important to maintain if you want to maximally help your patients. So instead of thinking about the fact that we have a bunch of different muscles, I think it's better to think about our muscles in terms of helping people and treating people in the clinic. Is think about the fact that we just have one big muscle, and then think about it as just lots of little parts of the same muscle. If you think about it that way, I think that really helps people from doing things like just focusing on the pelvic floor when you have an erectile dysfunction problem. Because if you think about it, it's one muscle that has a bunch of different parts. If you're treating the pelvic floor, it would also make sense to treat the neck, right? Because if you're going to go treat the bicep on somebody, you guys, with soft tissue work, you don't go in with one finger and treat one tiny little part of the bicep. You treat the whole freaking muscle, right? So if you think about all of our muscles as just different extensions of one big muscle, I think that's a better way to think about it. And it is kind of more or less true. Like there's all direct, indirect attachments, all these things. So all these muscles work in conjunction with each other. Nobody can just contract one of these muscles. And the bulbospongiosis is another good view, blends with the ischiocavernosus, and that blends with the other pelvic floor muscles. Here's the deep transverse perineal, you guys. So this would be considered one of the secondary layers of the pelvic floor. So you got the most superficial muscles, the ischiocavernosus and the bulbospongiosis. Then you go a layer deeper, and it's not technically deeper because those muscles aren't covering the whole thing, but that's how it's thought about, at least in the books and spoken about in the literature. So here's the deep transverse perineal. That's a bigger, thinner muscle, but these are all very, very strong muscles, you guys. And one of the things that we're going to talk about is the fact that the pelvic floor muscles attach in between bones that don't move all that much. So when the muscles get tight, they really pull on the periosteum. They cause a lot of inflammation, and that causes a lot of problems. So there's the deep transverse perineal. And remember, we go over specifically how to needle all these muscles in our lumbopelvic dry needling class. We go over how to do this in our dry needling 3 class, and we also go over how to do this in our advanced clinical dry needling class, you guys. So we cover this in a handful of our classes. It's a very, very important place to treat. Here's the superficial transverse perineal. So the center of the pelvic floor is typically considered to be the perineal body there, you guys, or the central tendon. So that's that little mark right above the rectum there where the two sides of the superficial transverse perineal meet. So if this is one side and that's the other side, and they're really kind of like my fingers, they're like little bandy ropey muscles right where they meet in the center of the bottom of the pelvic floor, that's typically considered to be like the central soft attachment point of all the structures in the pelvic floor. And it is more or less. There's other ones, but that's what it's considered to be most of the time. So there's the superficial transverse perineal. Here's the pubococcygeus, you guys. This is a crazy muscle. So I think it's probably basically impossible to ever get like an actual objective reading or number for this, like what is the most overall problematic muscle in the pelvic floor. This would be something super interesting to know. Like, for example, from the knee down, if somebody said what is the number one most problematic muscle, like overall, I think it's the tibialis posterior. If you talk about the pelvic floor, man, this would be the pubococcygeus would be at the top of my list, I think, because this muscle is like suspenders for your pelvic floor, you guys. If you look at this muscle and rotate the model around on the Human Anatomy Atlas where I got these pictures from, that muscle's literally like suspenders for your pelvic floor. So it sits under your pelvic floor. It goes from your coccyx all the way around to your pubis, and it holds up the bottom of your pelvic floor just like my arms are, you guys. So that's how that muscle attaches on the bottom of your pelvic floor. Because it goes from the back to the front and it wraps around the whole thing, that would be a good candidate for like the most problematic muscle down there. Because if it gets tight, it compresses and squeezes on like the whole thing, and it messes with the joints and all sorts of stuff. So that's a big problematic muscle. Another great one to treat. Here's the levator ani complex. So that pubococcygeus sits right there, you guys. Blends with all these other muscles. That's another big one. So when pelvic health therapists talk about doing internal vaginal work, you guys, typically they talk about like different knuckles, right? So the first knuckle would be like the first layer of muscles, and then second knuckle, second layer of muscles, third down is the deepest layer of muscles, which is considered the levator ani complex. So that's internal vaginal or rectal work, you guys, is still not a direct treatment. It's like going in your mouth for a pterygoid treatment. It's more direct than doing it from out here, but it's still not direct. Needling is the only treatment that we have that is a direct treatment, a direct contact of subcutaneous tissue, which is one of the most important underlying things about needling. So just directly touching these muscles, it stimulates the brain to wake up and pay attention to the area that it's kind of just left without actively monitoring, and it stimulates a huge amount of change, a huge amount of homeostasis, and it improves health a huge amount. So there's the levator ani complex. That's kind of like the whole deepest layer underneath the glute max of the pelvic floor. Here's the psoas major, you guys. So these are muscles that are not considered to be true pelvic floor muscles. The true pelvic floor muscles are the 9 true pelvic floor muscles that kind of start and stop inside the bottom of the pelvis. The psoas major obviously goes up into the lumbar spine and crosses the whole pelvis. It totally could be considered a pelvic floor muscle. But there's the psoas major. So look at the psoas major there. That muscle is attaching to the obturator externus. The obturator externus is going over. That's basically blending with the ischial cavernosus. The ischial cavernosus is blending with the bulbospongiosus. And then this picture here doesn't even have the adductors in. You got the gracilis and all those other muscles that are blending up there. So again, I think it's more clinically helpful to think about muscles as we have one huge muscle with different little attachments to it, and that helps practitioners kind of maintain in their brain, okay, if this is all the same muscle, which is more accurate to think about it that way as far as neurophysiology goes, I think, then I want to be treating as much of this muscle as I can to make it as healthy as I can, which would lead you to start treating as much of the body as you can each time you treat somebody, which makes a much bigger, better outcome as far as patient outcome, health span, lifespan, all that stuff. So there's the obturator externus. Again, that one's blending with the psoas major and the psoas minor, because the psoas minor is blending with the psoas major, right? So that you get those muscles there, and then it's going over, attaching towards where the ischial cavernosus is. So that's the obturator externus. Here's the obturator internus. This could be another one, you guys. The obturator internus, which is considered a true pelvic floor muscle, even though it does have an attachment outside of the actual true pelvis on the femur there. I think the obturator internus and the pubococcygeus, if you were going to rank muscles as far as biggest overall problem causes in the pelvic floor, that may be a good ranking. The pubococcygeus in the top 3, obturator internus in the top 3, and then I would put the psoas major up there also, but who knows? But regardless, this is a big problem causer. As far as hip mobility goes, the best way to mobilize a joint as far as improving all range of motions with a single direction of mobilization would be to mobilize the joint into either long axis distraction or lateral distraction or some type of distraction. So as far as the hip goes, the psoas major is the biggest compressor of long axis distraction in the hip, and the obturator internus is the biggest compressor of lateral distraction in the hip. So if you just look at the orientation of this muscle, you guys, it takes like a 90 or 100 degree turn around the ischial tuberosity there. And it just, when that contracts and it gets chronically tight and hypoxic like it is on like all physical therapy and on most patients, you guys, that just takes the hip joint and it sucks the head of the femur directly into the acetabulum. It causes a bunch of cartilage compression, pain, start causing little flaps and bone spurs in there. It causes all sorts of problems. So who knows which is the most problematic muscles? These are all muscles that need to be treated, but the obturator internus, in my opinion at least, would be up there on the top of the list as far as most problematic muscles in the body, especially as far as like joint specific stuff goes and as far as the autonomic nervous system itself goes. There's another picture of the psoas major. So like I mentioned, that one starts up in the lumbar spine, goes down kind of the front lateral side of the vertebral bodies, goes through the pelvic floor, attaches on the lesser trochanter. So that one, if we just go back one slide, there's the obturator internus again. You can see how when that muscle gets tight and chronically hypoxic and tight, it pulls the hip joint together this way. And then the psoas major here, that one pulls the hip together in long axis distraction. So psoas major is a huge problem causer. Remember, you guys, the kidneys and stuff sit right up there on the psoas major. The urethra and the ureter goes right down there. So the psoas major causes lots of problems with the intestines when it gets thicker and tighter. It pulls all the pelvic floor together, causes all sorts of problems. That's another one of my favorite muscles to treat. So there's the psoas major. Here's the multifidus, you guys, and I faded the quadratus lumborum here, so you can see the multifidus and the QL and the psoas major are basically all the same muscle. They're all touching each other, you guys. So it really does make a lot of sense to think about them kind of as like different extensions of the same muscle. I think it's basically impossible to have any type of pathology of one of these muscles without having concomitant pathology of the other two in short order. So regardless of what is getting tight first, All these muscles are touching each other down in the lumbar spine. You can see the QL is kind of overlapping with the multifidus, and then the psoas major kind of makes a sandwich with the QL out of the lumbar spine, and the multifidus has tendrils of the sympathetic chain going from the QL through from the psoas through the psoas back through the sympathetic or back through the multifidus. That just causes all sorts of problems when all these muscles get tight. These three muscles, you guys, the multifidus, the QL, and the psoas major are basically our like spinal lumbar corset. They're the three muscles that most encompass closely to the lumbar spine. Thanks for watching, you guys. If you like this clip, keep an eye on my channel. I'm going to keep putting clips from both of our online dry needling classes. This was a clip from our online dry needling 2 class, Dry Needling to Improve Men's and Women's Pelvic Health. Check it out on our website, intricateartseminars.com, or check out our school channel, school.com/CEU, SKOOL.com/CEU, to get a big discount on our dry needling bundle. It's a bundle of both of our online dry needling classes for a big discount.